Hello, this is Pastor Frank Lewis, and welcome to another program in which I will be talking to you today about what Jesus does to heal and to change false beliefs. That's a real important part of this next part here of the key. I explained to you last week about unresolved emotional pain and how it's so vitally important if we're going to have a great marriage, great relationships, to deal with unresolved emotional pain. I had shared the week before about the other half of the key, which is called reparenting. And that is a very, very important video. You may want to go back and watch that. And today I'm going to talk to you about the other half of the key, and that is soul redemption. Now, soul redemption is a name that God gave me for a process that He showed me because I knew about how God designed our brains through the research and the classes I had taken from about brain science. And so God designed our brains in a certain way, and because of how He designed our brains, we have to go and work with what He already created our brains to do. And that's what I learned from the brain scientists, but then God changed it so that I could use it for myself, for my wife, for some of the men in my men's group, to be able to help them to have false beliefs changed by Jesus, personally changed by Jesus. This is not the group concept. This is a personal process in which Jesus actually changes what we believe that's false. And so I called it soul redemption. I had been working to find out, remember last time I left you with the reality that I knew the problem was unresolved emotional pain. The question was, how was I going to resolve this emotional pain? What would happen? Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. But before we do, I want to talk to you and remind you about the book. I wrote this book called The Key. It's available on Amazon. You can come to my website. This book is a book for marriage. It's called What Women Need and Men Want. And it's a book that's for marrieds. And it's, by the way, what women need is, and men want, both parties want, both spouses want, is intimacy. And intimacy is something we can only have after we have resolved or healed from unresolved emotional pain. And so healing of the soul, or the redeeming of the soul redemption, is the name that God gave me. Now, I want to point out that the 7 books that I'm writing, the first one is about marriage, is under the umbrella of Relationships Revealed. You can go to relationshipsrevealed.org and you can find there the 7 titles of the 7 books. And you can also, there's a Want Help button and there's a Learn More button. If you'll give me your information, if you leave me your phone number with your email, then I can get in touch with you. And you don't have to wait so long. But let me know what you want help with. Let me know what you want some more information for. But on that, you can scroll all the way down, you can get the book. And the other thing is that I have a YouTube channel, and it's Pastor Frank Lewis, and you look it up, and it'll give you a playlist. And I think there's about 14 different videos on there now on marriage. And this is the first book. There'll be other books, but this is the first book. So today we're going to look at how does Jesus practically and step by step do what we call soul redemption. As I told you, that was the name that God gave me. And then He told me to trademark the name. So the name is trademarked. I own the trademark, and that name is trademarked because what He said was that I want you to have a way to protect the concept or the process by which Jesus changes the false beliefs to truth. But I also want people to know that there's two sides. There's two parts to the key. There's the soul redemption side, and there's the reparenting side. And they go together. And we couldn't have one without the other, and I'm going to explain that as we get into this. Because you've got to have the reparenting side to go along with the soul redemption side. But how in the world did I discover soul redemption? Well, I discovered it because I knew and had taken classes and was doing a lot of research, because what I had discovered when I took the classes, as I said last week, is that I found out why I was so angry. I found out why I was raging at my wife. I found out why I was so triggered. I found out it was unresolved emotional pain that I had not resolved, I had not dealt with, I had not healed from unresolved emotional pain. So because of that, what ended up happening is that I would trigger. I was hiding behind a facade and a mask. I found out that my life was so difficult because I ended up not having dealt with unresolved emotional pain. So I knew, because I had studied brain science, I knew that I would have to go back to a memory. Now, I want to talk to you for just a minute about going back to a memory. There's a lot of people have maybe experienced, maybe you've experienced inner healing. Inner healing is you go back to, and some people call it the healing of the memories. Well, I really don't see it that way. I see it as not the healing of the memory, because the memory is the memory. What happened to me, what happened to you is real. It happened. You can't deny it. It did happen. But what does come from every memory is a false belief about what happened. Remember, it's an interpretation from the left side of the brain of the experience. It's a misinterpretation. It's a faulty explanation. It's a false and incorrect judgment or incorrect assumption. Why? Because it has to go through the knowledge of good and evil, right? So you remember that. And so what I look at when I hear about inner healing, this is not, soul redemption is not inner healing. Reparenting is not inner healing. Inner healing that I experienced, and I did experience inner healing, is where Jesus came into a memory and he was just there in the memory. Now, he might have been tearing up for some of the pain that I went through. He might have been doing something, but the real essence of it was that I didn't have, in my experience with inner healing, I did not have him change the false belief. And unless I have him change the false belief, I learned from brain science, is I did not have permanent, non-maintainable change. So that's a problem, because a lot of people have gone through different forms of inner healing, and they have not had the kind of results that I have seen with the people that I have done soul redemption with. And by the way, just so you know, I've done over probably 2,000 soul redemption sessions in almost 20 years. And it is something to behold when someone actually experiences Jesus changing not the memory, but changing the interpretation. The interpretation is totally changed by what Jesus does. Okay? Now, I didn't know that that's what was going to be happening. I knew that I had to go back to the memory. But I didn't want to go back to the memory like I have with inner healing, because I knew that that hadn't really changed much for me. Changed some, it was good, but it didn't change much for me. So, and I've talked to scores and scores of other people that have been through inner healing, and it's not been the same result of Jesus changing the interpretation of the event, Jesus changing the explanation of the event. So let me go back. So here I am. I've got unresolved emotional pain. I've got the understanding of brain science. And so I realized I have to go back to the memory. Why am I going to go back to the memory? I'm going to go back to the memory because that's where the unresolved emotional pain is embedded, if you will. And so I go back to the memory. This happened one day. I was just kind of seeing how this might work. And I said, Jesus, would you take me back to a memory that I need to go back to? Well, lo and behold, he did. And I saw myself as a 2-year-old. My dad was a doctor. I think I mentioned that to you. He's a very angry doctor because of what had happened to him in his childhood. And so he could blow up in a just, trigger so quickly. It was just hard to even imagine. So he's a doctor, and I have what he considers pre-pneumonia symptoms. And so he gets his shot out, his injection of penicillin. That's all they had in those days, penicillin, and he's going to give me a shot. Well, he gives me a shot, and it hurts like heck. I mean, it hurt. It really hurt. The needles were much bigger. They weren't, sharp and like they are now. And so what ended up happening is I was very hurt that my father would stick this thing in my arm that hurt me so bad. So the next time this was the memory that I was back into, the next time I saw him getting the shot ready, I ran away. I started to run. Well, he ran after me, tackled me, and slammed this needle into my bottom. And I want to tell you, it hurt. And then he yelled at me. And that was even more hurtful. And so here's the memory I go back to. I'm in pain. I'm feeling some of this pain now. I can barely handle it. And so I didn't know what to do, but I said, Jesus, what do you want to tell me? And I just said that. And lo and behold, I got a vision. I saw Jesus come into the memory, come into that scene, if you will, and he ended up picking me up and putting me over his shoulder, patting me on the back, and comforting me. I mean, really comforting me. And then when I stopped crying and I felt comforted, he set me down, walked over to my father. I'm seeing all this. This is in this scene. He walks over to my father and puts his finger in his face and said, that's not the way to treat your son. Well, you can imagine. I was blown away. I could hardly believe what I was experiencing. It was amazing. First of all, I knew Jesus cared for me. Second of all, I knew that he was taking care of something for me that I couldn't take care of for myself. He actually went up to my father and took care of my father. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is phenomenal. I could hardly believe what was happening. And so I knew that something amazing had happened, and I couldn't wait to tell my wife. And so what ended up happening is I came out of the whole thing, and I realized that, wow, I felt different about my father. I didn't believe because Jesus comforted me, showed me how much he cared for me. I had a new interpretation of the event. I didn't believe the false explanation. You know what the false explanation was? That I was bad and that I deserved the pain because I ran from my father. That I was a bad boy and I ran from my father and I deserved the pain. Well, was that true? Did I deserve the pain? No, that wasn't true. But that was the explanation. It was false. But Jesus came, and in the vision, I saw him actually pick me up, put me on his shoulder and comfort me, and then set me down as a 2-year-old and then go over and talk to my father. I want to tell you, it was a new interpretation. It was a new explanation. It wasn't that I was bad. It wasn't that I ran for him and deserved this pain. It was, he cared for me, and he's taking care of my father. And I looked at that whole situation differently. I felt different about my father. I didn't believe that he was out to hurt me. As I began to see this more and more as to what, after Jesus did this, I realized, oh my gosh, he was just trying to give me a shot because my mother had had pneumonia and she almost died, and it was because of penicillin and all of the penicillin he gave her that she actually lived. So he's a big believer in antibiotics. He always was, forever, because he believed in what happened that saved my mother's life. So he believed that he needed to give me this shot. Well, I had a new belief. And what I actually experienced was exactly what the brain scientists had said. They had said, and I had known this, but I didn't know how it played out. They had said, in order to change an experiential belief that's false, you must have a new experiential, that's a new experience, that is true. Well, what was true was Jesus and what he did. What was false was what I believed, and it was changed by what Jesus did. Well, that was a miracle. I mean, I was blown away. Like I said, it was amazing. So I decided, well, shoot, if I could do this for me, maybe I could do this for my wife. So I ended up going ahead and I told my wife that, we needed to do this. Well, we did it. And Jesus took her back to a time that she was evicted, and they were all walking down she was the oldest of 9 brothers and sisters, so she was the 10th. But at this time, there was about 7 of them. So they were like little ducks. The mom was carrying the baby, there was my wife, and then her brothers and sisters. But she said, I felt like a sitting duck. And there was trees where they were, and she felt like there was hunters in the trees, and that she was in jeopardy. Well, guess what ended up happening? She ended up seeing the hunters in the trees. And she told me that. And she said, oh my gosh, there's hunters in the trees. They have guns. And then she said, she chuckled, because what happened is they shot their guns and little pop corks came out on string. And so it was amazing. So what did Jesus show my wife? He showed her that he had it all under control, that the hunters weren't real, that they only had pop guns, and she felt more valuable and more important, just like I felt more valuable and more important. So I had done this with my wife, and now I decided, let's do it with some of the people in my men's group. I had a few people volunteer, and I'll be darned if they didn't have the same kind of result. Very, very powerful. So what happened is, I now knew that this would work, but I wanted to find out, was this something that I had to do over and over again, or was this permanent? Could this possibly be permanent? And so I felt like I needed to go back to that memory again. And when I went back to the memory again, I'll be darned, it wasn't the faulty explanation that came up. It was this picture of Jesus doing what he had done for me. And I realized, oh my gosh, I went to my wife and I said, when you see yourself walking down the street with the trees, what do you see? She says, I see hunters in the trees. They're shooting their guns, and the corks are popping out and on a string. And I said, oh my gosh, this is permanent. This is permanent, and we don't have to maintain it. This is going to deal with with false belief. This is going to help to get unresolved emotional pain resolved, healed permanently. I was like ecstatic. It was amazing. Now, I have done Since in the last 20 years, I just told you, I've done probably over 2,000 of these, and it has been remarkable. But not everybody is able to get the results that my wife and I and other people, lots of other people, have gotten. They have not been able to go back to the memory. A few times I've had that happen because a person was severely neglected. If you have been severely neglected, this is going to be hard for you, because severely neglected people believe that Jesus doesn't have the time for them, that they're just not valuable and important enough for him to do that. I've also had people that have been so the experience was so excruciatingly painful. I had one person, his mother tried to drown him in a sink. He could not go back to the memory. It was just too painful. And so there's that kind of thing. I found out also that if a person can't get back to a memory, it's oftentimes they haven't forgiven the person who caused them the pain. They haven't forgiven mom or dad or some sister or brother or uncle, somebody. And so we go through the forgiveness and they hear Jesus. Usually that's what's happened in all these ones that I've done. But what has really occurred is they have been able to come, this isn't a one-night thing. This is, a one-day thing. This isn't a one of, you do this once and everything changes. What happens is you have to do it over and over. I've done it scores and scores and scores of times, and it's been remarkable. My wife did it scores of times, and it was remarkable. I've had other people do it numerous times, and it's been remarkable, because what it does is it causes us to not have the emotional triggers that come from unresolved emotional pain. We just don't have the problem like we have had before we went through soul redemption. Now, some people talk about, I went through deliverance and, that seemed to help. But I want to tell you that deliverance is good and casting out demons is good. There's no question about it. But here's the problem. If you go through deliverance, you're not casting out false beliefs. You're casting out demons. And the way the Lord showed it to me is, think of it as a stack of bricks. You got a stack of bricks, 6 feet high. They're all stacked or 5 feet high. And you just push them over with one finger because there's no grout in it, okay? Well, if you put grout down, you put the brick down, you put grout down, you put the brick down, you can build a 5-foot wall, and you can't push it over with one finger. You have to push it over with a bulldozer, okay? Why? Because the grout is the cement that keeps the bricks together. Well, the Holy Spirit showed me that if we have grout, that's the demonic. The demonic comes in through trauma. Through any childhood trauma, the demonic comes in, and the demonic then holds in place, just like the grout holds the bricks, the demonic holds the false beliefs and the misinterpretations of these painful childhood events in place. And so deliverance takes the grout out of the bricks and makes the job of soul redemption much easier. Now, we can do soul redemption without deliverance, but I've found it works a lot better. So I recommend that people go and see my friend who's been doing deliverance for 44 years, and they go see him, and then they come back and see me, and we deal with these false beliefs. But the main thing that is so powerful is the way Jesus does this. Now, I have Jesus not only come into a scene, the memory, come into there, through a vision, actually coming into it, but he'll oftentimes speak, and he'll say words that are actually the exact opposite of what a person believes. When I do a session, I ask a person, we ask Jesus to take him back to the memory that he wants him to go back to. I then go ahead and I say to the person, they tell me what memory they're, I say, well, how did it make you feel when this happened? And they give me a list of feelings. Well, those list of feelings always come from misinterpretations, always come from false beliefs. So what happens is, I then am able to see that what Jesus says to them actually is an override. It actually changes these feelings so they don't have those feelings anymore. And so that happens, and it happens regularly, that they don't have the feelings anymore. Jesus can also do it with an impression. And the impression can be just, I was impressed that Jesus loved me, or whatever he's saying, impressing them with. The main part of this that's so powerful is that Jesus wants, desires you to be healed of emotional pain. He wants you to be free. See, we're all living in brokenheartedness. We're all living according to Luke 4:18. Jesus wants to set us free, heal us, and cause us to the oppressed to be free. And we need to realize Jesus wants us more than we even do. So I'm excited that you have now understood the second half of the key. And the second half of the key is soul redemption. Jesus changing the misinterpretation, changing the false belief to his truth. And when that happens, then everything changes. Now, soul redemption can't be done without the other side of the key, which is reparenting. Why? Because we don't have the emotional maturity coming just from dealing with the false beliefs. We can't get emotionally mature just dealing with false beliefs. It's the first step in maturity, dealing with false beliefs, but we need a group, a community to help us to actually get into emotional maturity and walk out of the freedom that we've received from soul redemption. So this is the key. Jesus wants it for you. I want it for you. And soul redemption is going to change your life. Reparenting will be how you walk it out. So you can have a great marriage. So you can have the abundant life that Jesus promised. And I declare that you will have a great marriage, a marriage made right here in heaven on earth.